Games. We're a non-profit which helps support the game development industry in Perth, and we're very happy to be here. Thank you to Screenwest, particularly Michelle, for organising the event. So I'm just going to jump right into it. I guess I'd just like a show of hands to start with. How many people here are part of the games industry or see themselves as game developers? And how many people are from other industries and interested in game development? So it looks like we're kind of 30, 40, 50, 60. We have, the main part of this is going to be a panel discussion. The basic format for tonight is we're going to have a 15, 20-minute presentation just to make sure that everybody's kind of well versed in the terminology of games. And then we'll invite a number of panelists down, and our panelists will be available to answer questions. And these are people who work locally in the games industry. So this presentation is very much a whirlwind tour for the uninitiated. And hopefully there's also something in there for people who are already in the games industry but maybe don't appreciate how other people might see or get into games. I'll start at the very top. What are games? I think a lot of people generally tend to think of games as content and interactivity, but those two together only get you interactive media, not necessarily games. You can have something you can play with, something which you can toy with, something that's engaging and interesting artistically, but it's not a game until you add mechanics. And the game mechanics are really the rules that govern the game. Combined with interactive media, they produce gameplay, and that's when you get into game territory. So a few examples. I won't go straight into video games. I'll talk about basic media and content first. You have a piece of paper with 4 lines on it. You can interact with that paper in various ways. With a drawing implement, you can draw all sorts of shapes. And it doesn't become a game until you add some basic mechanics, which you take turns drawing noughts and crosses, and when you get 3 in a row, you win. So that's just a very basic example where media and content, I feel, are quite distinct from mechanics, and the game comes by melding all of those together. Here's another example, also non-video game. You have a book with a written story in it, and the story can be structured in a certain way. You've got very basic interactivity. You can turn pages, and you can turn to any page you want at any time. You can find out the ending, but it's not really going to have any meaning or structure until you add some mechanics to it. Normal mechanics for a book is turn to the next page. You can have a choose your own adventure book. I don't know if people remember these from the sort of 80s and 90s, where you make choices. The mechanics are, there's a question posed to you. You decide on what you're going to do, and then you turn to a corresponding page. So that's an example of mechanics being added to some existing medium in order to produce gameplay. And here is a more sophisticated modern example. This is a video of a game called Heavy Rain. It came out last year on PlayStation 3. And there's some fairly basic interactions within the game. You can see here there's an icon which appears, and that tells the player that they're meant to do something with their controller. Another one. Look closely, there's going to be things floating around the sort of protagonist's head, which are decisions which a player can make.
I'd like to ask you a few questions.
When this is played on PlayStation 3, you can actually move the camera around, you can direct where the characters go, you've got a lot of fine-grained control. But this is how you play this game on YouTube. On YouTube, someone's actually pulled the cutscenes or the sequences from the game, taken care of the minor interactions, and broken it out into videos where you can still click through and make these choices. So this is a good example, I feel, where there's some sound gameplay mechanics, there's a consistent story, but the interactivity in the medium can change. So I've talked about a few different types of games, but at Let's Make Games, when we talk about games, we generally mean video games. Or at least games which are enabled by technology, maybe games that you play on your mobile phone, maybe collective games where you will have to tweet something in, something web-based. Because right now, that's where we feel it is at in terms of the most sophisticated and most interesting games. Now, for people who aren't already making games, you might be thinking, what sort of games will you make or can you make? I think a lot of people here would be familiar with media and content, which is digital video, digital audio, and maybe the content for it is documentary, educational. You have a whole wealth of ways in which participants can interact with that media. You have a whole bunch of touchscreen devices. There seems to be a new one coming out every day. You've got cameras on mobile devices, on PCs. You've got the traditional mouse and keyboard, and you can even have interaction from things where people would tweet things in or post things to your Facebook page. But the mechanics is the big question mark. Much like you want to get a graphic designer to make sure that you have a professional website or some sort of presentation, you want to make sure that you have people who are familiar with game design and people who know how mechanics work, balancing mechanics, and how to get the most out of your media to make sure that combined with mechanics, it gets you where you're going with your audience, with your participants. So why games? Games take your audience and turn them into participants. This can drive greater engagement. You can create a dialogue with them and with each other if it's a multiplayer game, and it makes people invested in what you're doing. It creates this blurry line between authors and participants, where authors are designing a game with some sort of universal story, and participants are playing the game and writing their own personal story while they play the game. I think an analogy which I like to make here is that society tends to dictate a lot of things about the lives which you will live. Because we live here in Perth, because we're human, because it's the 21st century, there are so many things which are universal about the way you live. People going to school, people going to university, people getting married, people wanting to have kids. All of these things are part of this universal story of mankind, I guess, or humankind. And you have your own personal story. And games can be very similar, depending on the type, where you design this entire world. You're not writing a direct story, but you're constructing an environment in which people can create their own stories. So I find that incredibly exciting. Who plays games? Now, I just want people to think about this as a question, I guess. Imagine in your mind's eye the average gamer. Was that what you thought? I guess. The average gamer is 34 years old, and they spend 8 hours a week on gaming. They're not playing all the time. 40% of gamers are female. And the commercial games market is absolutely huge. There are over 500 million dedicated, or essentially dedicated games systems. I guess dedicated or available because your iPhones, your iPads aren't available. And this isn't taking into account all of the PCs which are already out there. So there is a massive market of people who can access games. The social games market is breaking down barriers. You can see that the demographics for social games are very different to your average gamer. It's got a good 10 years on people. Majority of them are female. And there is, again, 56 million people playing games on Facebook. It is a huge market. The indie market is booming. People may not be familiar with all of these games. Minecraft was a game created by one person initially. It hasn't been officially released yet, and it's pre-sold 1.5 million copies. Fruit Ninja was developed locally. It's an iPhone game. It's had over 20 million downloads. Mystery Case File, something which you would think is a very sort of niche market, has done incredibly well. So indie games are definitely doing very well. Now, for people who aren't in the games industry, you might be thinking, who makes games? I just put together a short list here, I guess. And you can see here that programmers will play a key role because a lot of video games are very technical in nature, and also testing and specific designers, which are specific to games design. The development process is slightly different terminology, I guess, to other creative industries. You develop the game, you move into alpha, in which you're still testing different game mechanics, I guess, and balancing. beta, which you're trying to iron out bugs, and then final release. This is during a game jam a couple of years ago. And a game jam is a short event, usually 48 hours, in which people get together and get given a theme, and then form ad hoc teams and make a game. And at release, it's time for sleep. Just to get you an idea about games companies, these are, I think, the top 20 games companies as of October last year, and obviously the larger ones are bigger. If you look at the ones in blue, these are new entries into the top 20. And those new entries are sort of traditional media companies, Disney, Warner coming in, Apple, which are getting into everything, and then Zynga and Nexon, which kind of are more social media and mobile platform type games. And they're just skyrocketing up in terms of capturing this new market with a demographic that's fairly different to the traditional games market. So there's a lot of scope there to enter the market. In terms of the local industry, I grabbed a lot of pictures. This isn't exhaustive, but I just wanted to get people to see a bunch of companies which are producing work here in Perth. Again, just a whole smattering of locally developed games. This is not exhaustive again, so I apologise if your game isn't here. In terms of just numbers that we have, as I said, we're a volunteer-run non-profit, so we have a number of teams linked from our website, we have a number of games profiles, but we suspect that there are a lot more out there. In particular, if you see a profile on our website, it's because those people have come to us and provided all the information required. So it's a fairly proactive process, and we feel that there are a lot more people out there. Also something which Simon Whitbeer is here. He's been organising game jams for years here in Perth, and we were the first Australian city to participate in Global Game Jam. And I think that speaks volumes for the enthusiasm of the indie scene here in Perth. Now just a little bit about us, Let's Make Games. We are 6 people. Min and I started Let's Make Games back in the day. Dan Eichling used to be part of us. Anthony Sweet came on very quickly. And now we have our videographers, and Chris, who runs the Perth Independent Game Makers Initiative, has also come on board. We have a website, so please check that out, and you'll find a lot more information there. Including, as I said, the games directory, the industry directory. We've got a mailing list, a feed aggregator. If you have a blog, you're a game developer in Perth, please let us know. We'll add it to our feed aggregator. We run 4 major events each year: a social event, a pitching workshop, which is coming up in a couple of months, a showcase, and then an end-of-year party. And we tend to run or help with a bunch of other small events which kind of go in between those. Just a few pictures. This is from when we started, actually before Let's Make Games. We've been running a bunch of events for people to get to know each other, show off their games. This was during a music game competition. These are the winners, called Rainbow Stars. This was our end-of-year party at the Innovation Centre, I think in 2009. And this was our most recent end-of-year party. This was last year. We had it at the Universal Bar, and you can see that people brought various games along to play, and there was quite a good sort of casual feel and environment. I just want to showcase some of the work our videographers are doing. This was our most recent event, which was a sundowner and barbecue last month, and it's just a great way to go out and meet people. We've got a bunch of interviews from one of our previous events on our website, so check those out. Also got various technical talks. This is Aranda Morrison talking about his Xbox 360 game. Anyhow, that was it for our whirlwind tour. I hope that was useful information. Feel free to chase any of us up to follow us up on that information. And yeah, we definitely want to hear from you if you're interested in games, if you're interested in making games, if you make games, please contact us. So,